In this video we are going to imagine what would happen if a collection of instruments, amplifiers and other items belonging to one of the most influential and revered rock musicians of all time were to come up for auction. So now let's count down 20 highlight results from our imagined sale of Jimmy Page's guitars, equipment and more. See what you think to the estimates and the prices realised, and let me know if you think they are too high, too low or about right. Number 20 on our list of highlights is a Rickenbacker Transonic cabinet. Jimmy inherited two of these cabs from his days with the Yardbirds and used them with his Vox UL7120 amplifier head. Whilst they didn't see action for the first album, they were used by Jimmy while recording Led Zeppelin II at Olympic Studios No. 1 in London. The estimate for the cab was $2,000 to $3,000, but it went way above this and achieved $24,000. Next up was Jimmy's grey Vox wah-wah pedal. The wah has always been a key component of Jimmy's sound, and he first used this pedal with the Yardbirds, keeping it in service for the first two Zeppelin albums and not replacing it until the middle of 1970. Known as the grey Vox wah because of the colour of the housing, the pedal was introduced in 1967. The estimate here was $2,000 to $3,000, and once again the bidding was keen, taking the final price including the buyer's premium to $28,800. Coming in at number 18 in our fantasy auction, the next highlight is a pair of black and white stage shoes. Jimmy wore these very distinctive shoes extensively during the early 1970s, and they can be clearly seen in many photographs from the period, including my own favourite image of the guitarist by Michael Putland from 1972. The shoes carried an estimate of $1,000 to $2,000 and sold for an eye-watering $30,000. Highlight number 17 is Jimmy's 1965 Vox CO2 Long Tom Tape Echo. These are considered to be one of the finest of their kind, and Jimmy used his to great effect. As with the Transonic cab, the Long Tom Echo can be seen in photographs taken during the recording of Led Zeppelin II at Olympic Studios No. 1 in London. The Long Tom had an estimate of $3,000 to $5,000 and achieved $31,200. Next on our list is the 1966 Solar Sound Tonebender Professional Mark II. This, of course, was another key contributor to Jimmy's sound. He first experimented with fuzz units during his time as a session musician and then continued to use them with the Yardbirds and then Led Zeppelin. With an estimate of $3,000 to $5,000, the Tonebender sold for $36,000. Coming in at number 15 is a Marshall 4x12 1982B speaker cabinet from 1969. Jimmy started using Marshalls in the second half of '69, having previously been using the Supro combo for the first album, the Vox live and in the studio, and then briefly Hiwatts. This is the one with Jimmy's famous astrological symbol on the front. The estimate was $10,000 to $15,000 and it sold for $120,000. Number 14 on our highlights list is the 1966 Vox UL7120 amplifier. In his anthology book, Jimmy said, "I didn't use my Vox amplifier on the first album, but I did use it on stage for all the American dates, like the Fillmore. I had inherited the amplifiers from the Yardbirds. This model was supplied by Vox to the Beatles so they could hear themselves play over the barrage of screaming from the audience. The estimate on the Vox amp was $10,000 to $15,000 and it made almost 10 times the higher end of that at $144,000. Coming in at number 13 on our list of fantasy auction items is Jimmy's main live Led Zeppelin amp, his Marshall JMP Super Bass 100 watt head, known as Number 1. In the anthology, Jimmy explained the switch to Marshalls. Through Peter Grant, we acquired a road manager from New Zealand called Clive Coulson. He constantly told me I should get Marshall amplifiers, but I was happy with what I'd got and didn't want to follow the herd. The crew were getting nervous about my Vox amplifier. It felt vintage even at the time, and we wouldn't have been able to get a replacement or spare parts if anything had gone wrong with it. As it turned out, my Vox never did go down, but I replaced it all the same. First, I got a high watt as an interim measure, and then I eventually went over to the Marshalls. The point was that Marshalls were reliable, and you could pick up replacements anywhere. The Number 1 amp head carried an estimate of $20,000 to $30,000, and some fierce bidding saw it sell for a whopping $216,000. Taking the number 12 slot is the stage suit that Jimmy Page wore during the concert filming at Madison Square Garden in 1973. The footage, of course, would later be used in The Song Remains the Same. Now known as the Song Remains the Same suit, Jimmy bought this legendary piece of stage wear in Los Angeles during the 1973 tour. The image of Jimmy wearing this suit will forever be etched onto the memory of those who are familiar with the film. The estimate was $20,000 to $30,000, but the hammer didn't come down until the bidding reached $200,000, which meant that with the addition of the buyer's premium, the successful bidder paid $240,000. The next highlight lot on our list is Jimmy's 1959 Supro combo amp. This amp, in conjunction with the 59 Telecaster, the Tonebender Fuzz, the Vox Wah and the Echo, were the key ingredients that came together to create the sound of Led Zeppelin 1. For a long time there was nothing but speculation about which model from the Supro range Page had used. But with the release of the reissue Sun Dragon amplifier range in 2019, the speculation was put to rest. The amp was a 1959 Supro Coronado 1690T. Originally, the amp carried two 10-inch speakers, but after damage suffered through a fall from the back of a lorry, Page replaced them with a single 12-inch Oxford Alnico speaker adapted with an 8-ohm British cone. This modification, together with a few circuit changes, gave the amp its unique sound. So this is the amp we hear on all of the first Led Zeppelin album, and at the very least on the Stairway to Heaven solo, when it was once again teamed with the Telecaster. When the combo was reissued as the Sun Dragon in 2019, it was released as a limited edition of just 50 amps, each signed by Jimmy Page. The retail price was $12,500, and they sold out very quickly. When the original amp hit the auction block at our fantasy sale, it had an estimate of $20,000 to $30,000 and sold for $240,000. Coming in at number 10 is the Vox Phantom 12. This particular guitar was made in 1966, and Jimmy used it with the Yardbirds for Glimpses and Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor. Before that, he had used it in 1965 on a session for the Fifth Avenue's recording of Bells of Rimney. The inspiration for getting the guitar, as Jimmy explained in the anthology, came from a trip to Los Angeles and seeing Jim McGuinn playing a 12-string. It's one of the electric 12-strings I used as the bedding for Stairway to Heaven, he explained in the anthology. The other 12-string we know to have been the Fender. He added, it's also on Thank You, so it's had quite an interesting life. When the guitar was brought out of storage to be photographed for the anthology, Jimmy said, I hadn't actually seen it for quite a while, so it was nice to get it out and play it again. The Vox 12-string had an estimate of $500,000 to $750,000, and it was the first of our highlights to exceed the $1 million mark, selling for $1,200,000. At number 9 on our highlights list is Jimmy's Lake Placid Blue Fender Stratocaster. The guitar is a rosewood fingerboard model and dates to 1960. Jimmy used this guitar live on No Quarter during one of the 1975 shows at Earl's Court. He was spotted bringing it out halfway through the song and speculated himself, having seen the photograph, that he had perhaps broken a string on the Les Paul. It was also used by Jimmy in the studio on For Your Life from the Presence album, and in 1979 he brought it out once again and used it at the Nebworth concert. With a pre-sale estimate of $500,000 to $750,000, the guitar sold for $1,480,000. As we move up the list of highlights, the next lot we come to is the Fender Electric 12. Like the Vox, this guitar dates to 1966. Jimmy famously used this guitar when he helped Jeff Beck create the instrumental Beck's Bolero. The two of them got together with a tape recorder in Page's home in Epsom, writing the song there and then. He used the guitar again for the studio recording of the tune on the 16th of May 1966, when, apart from himself and Jeff Beck, the musicians present were John Paul Jones, Nicky Hopkins and Keith Moon. In 2009, when Jimmy formally inducted Jeff Beck into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the two of them took to the stage to perform Beck's Bolero, and Jimmy used his original Fender 12. With Led Zeppelin, the guitar's most notable appearance was arguably when it was used alongside the Vox on Stairway to Heaven. The estimate for this guitar was $500,000 to $750,000, and it sold for $1,800,000. Coming in at number 7 on our list is the Danelectro 3021. Jimmy bought this guitar from Selmer's Music Shop in London during his days as a session musician. In the anthology, he explained how guitars were becoming more and more expensive and welcomed the introduction of the Danelectro as a budget model, where it retailed at the time for around £35 or £40. Jimmy said he got his Danelectro very shortly after they were introduced, which was fortunate because apparently they didn't stay available for very long. He speculated that other brands might have complained to Selmer that they were being undercut. Either way, the window to get one closed very quickly. This was the guitar on which Jimmy wrote two of Led Zeppelin's most famous tracks, Kashmir and In My Time of Dying, both of which, of course, are highlight songs on Physical Graffiti. It was also his guitar of choice for playing White Summer and Black Mountain Side live. And before Jimmy got his number 1 Les Paul, the Danelectro was used as a backup for the Telecaster. Our estimate for the Danelectro was $750,000 to $1,250,000, and in our fantasy auction, the price realised was $2,400,000. Number 6 on the highlight list is Jimmy's Gibson Les Paul Custom, a guitar that is often referred to as the Black Beauty. This one was bought by Jimmy from Lou Davis's shop on Charing Cross Road in London. When he first plugged it in, he said the sound was amazing and he knew there and then that he had to have it. Making that happen involved trade-ins and a hire purchase agreement, but it was around this time that Jimmy was spotted at the Marquee Club and invited to do some session work, and it was this work that helped him buy the guitar. This is a 1960 model with the customary all-gold hardware, including 3 PAF humbucking pickups and a Bigsby tremolo arm. The serial number is 06130. The guitar was stolen during an early Led Zeppelin tour of the United States, disappearing from Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport in April 1970. After more than 35 years, Jimi was finally reunited with the guitar on November the 12th, 2015. There is some excellent footage of Jimi playing this guitar at the Led Zeppelin concert at the Royal Albert Hall from January the 9th, 1970. Not surprisingly, the Black Beauty drew a lot of attention at our fantasy auction, and from an estimate of $1 million to $1,500,000, the guitar sold for $3 million. Coming in at number 5 is the Martin D28. This particular guitar was manufactured in 1969 and was one of the last D28s to use Brazilian roadwood for the back and sides. The fingerboard is ebony. Jimi bought this as a guitar to tour with, a slot that had previously been filled by his Harmony Sovereign. He first used it at the Windsor Festival of Blues and Progressive Music on June the 28th, 1970, to play That's the Way, and the first times we hear the guitar on vinyl are in The Rain Song, Bron Ra, and Over the Hills and Far Away, which were recorded a few years later. In the mid-1970s, it was equipped with a Barkasberry 1355 transducer, which hooked up to a Barkasberry 1330S preamp. This allowed Jimi to run the guitar directly into an amp, and this is how it was when Jimi used it for all the acoustic numbers on Led Zeppelin's 1973 tour of Europe. It is clearly one of Jimi's most important instruments, and this is why our estimate on the guitar of $1 million to $1,500,000 was totally destroyed, with the D28 selling for $4,560,000. Staying with the acoustics, highlight number 4 is the Harmony Sovereign H1260. This is a cornerstone guitar in Jimi's collection, and he used it to write virtually all of the songs on the first Led Zeppelin album and much of the material on the 3 albums that followed. The guitar played a large part in the recording of Led Zeppelin 3. We hear it first with an open C6 tuning on Friends, then on Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, Bron Ra Stomp, and Hats Off to Roy Harper, as well as 2 tracks that did not make it to the album, Key to the Highway, Trouble in Mind, and Hey Hey, What Can I Do? But despite all of those outings on Led Zeppelin 3, the most famous appearance of the Harmony Sovereign was on the 4 Symbols album, Led Zeppelin 4, on Stairway to Heaven. That alone puts this guitar in a league of its own. The estimate for this guitar, just like the Black Beauty and the Martin, was $1 million to $1,500,000, but the Stairway Association propelled it way above this to $4,800,000. At number 3 on our fantasy auction list is the 1959 Fender Dragon Telecaster. It's well documented how this guitar was gifted to Jimi by Jeff Beck as a thank you for recommending Jeff to the Yardbirds. Originally white blonde, Jimi first added circular mirrors to the guitar before famously stripping the body entirely, repainting it during the course of an evening in bright poster colours. The design he created took the form of a dragon. Jimi used the Telecaster with his modified Supro Coronado to create the sound of the first Led Zeppelin album, although it has been jokingly said on more than one occasion that Led Zeppelin 1 sold more Les Pauls than anything that had gone before it. The guitar suffered a great indignity around 1970 when a friend of Jimi's stripped away the Dragon and repainted the body with a design of his own. At that point it was retired from public appearance, but its days in the spotlight were far from over, because this was the guitar that Jimi used to record the solo in Stairway to Heaven. In 2017, the Telecaster got a new lease of life when Jimi painstakingly recreated the dragon painting on the body. To celebrate that rebirth, Fender issued a tribute guitar, not only as the Dragon, but also in the original guise of a regular white blonde, rosewood-necked 1959 Telecaster. The impact of this instrument on the history of the guitar and music in general cannot be overstated. The estimate was $1,500,000 to $2 million, and when the bidding closed, the guitar had been bought for $4,800,000. Coming in at number 2 is one of the instruments that is most associated with Jimmy Page. It is, of course, the cherry red 1968 Gibson EDS 1275 doubleneck. Pondering how he could recreate the feel of Stairway to Heaven live in concert, when the record had featured acoustic, 12-string electric and regular 6-string work, Jimmy decided that 2 necks would be needed to do the job, one with 6 strings and one with 12. And so it was that he bought the EDS 1275. It wasn't long at all before the guitar found a purpose extending beyond Stairway to Heaven, as can be seen in the film The Song Remains the Same, where in addition to Stairway, we see Jimmy using the guitar on the title track and also for the Rain song. There are a few curious points about this instrument. In the anthology, Jimmy states in several places that it is a 1968 guitar, and yet when Gibson released its supremely accurate tribute reissue model in 2024, it was said to date to 1969. Another mystery is the colour of the control knobs. The reissues and most footage and images show them as black, but there are a few images in circulation clearly showing gold knobs. In addition, one of the 2 gold knob pictures shows the pickup covers still on the 6th string. Did Jimmy have 2 double necks, or did he borrow one while his was out of action, or did he swap the knobs around and experiment with pickup covers on and off? Tell me what you think. Either way, the guitar in this auction is the black knobbed ES 1275 as seen in The Song Remains the Same. From an estimate of $1,500,000 to $2 million, the guitar sold for $6 million. There can be only one guitar that takes the top slot in our Jimmy Page fantasy auction, and that, without doubt, is the number 1 Gibson Les Paul Standard. Ever since the spring of 1969, when Jimmy Page bought this guitar from Joe Walsh for $500, this has been his main guitar. Starting out as a vibrant cherry sunburst when we first catch sight of it in 1969, it didn't take long before the guitar faded into that characteristic honey colour of old Les Pauls. With no serial number owing to the guitar having had its neck shaved and refinished shortly before Page bought it, there is no definitive way of knowing if it is from 1958, 59, or even the first few months of 1960, when the appointments were unchanged from the year before. The lack of a serial number will usually drastically affect the value of an original Sunburst Les Paul. But if there's going to be an exception to that rule, there can be none more dramatic than in the case of Jimmy's number 1. We placed an estimate on the guitar of $2 million to $3 million, but when the hammer finally came down, the winning bidder parted with an eye-watering $12 million. I hope you have enjoyed this fantasy auction. Please do let me know what you think of the estimates and the results. Do you think they are in the ballpark? Or do you think they are too low? Or do you think they are too high? Please share your thoughts. Cheers for now.